Hi and welcome to your first video tutorial on how to draw a Bohr diagram. This video tutorial is twofold. One, to review parts of an atom, and two, what are the key steps to drawing a Bohr diagram. Okay. So we're going to start off with a Bohr model for a nitrogen atom. Now remember that atoms have three subatomic particles: protons and neutrons, which exist in the nucleus, and electrons on the outside, which travel in something called electron orbits or electron orbitals, or electron shells. Okay. From your note, which I'm hoping that you've at least glanced over before viewing this tutorial, remember that your electron shells can have a maximum number of shells in it. So the first shell outside your nucleus has a maximum number of 2 electrons. Your second shell or orbital has a maximum of 8. Your third shell from the nucleus has a maximum of 8, and your fourth shell from your nucleus also has a maximum number of 8 electrons. I would highly recommend that you memorize this because it will not be given to you. So again, the first electron shell from your nucleus has 2, and then the second, third, and fourth shell all have 8 electrons. Okay. So let's look at how to draw a Bohr diagram using the information that we get from protons, neutrons, and electrons, all from the periodic table. Okay. Another thing to note is when we have atoms, so if we're just looking at the elements on the periodic table, these atoms are neutral. Okay, meaning that we have the same number of protons as we do electrons. My positive charges will cancel out my negative charges. So let's look at our first example here, and our first example is hydrogen. Okay. Using the periodic table, you should be able to determine the atomic number and the mass, and then calculate its protons, neutrons, and electrons. So hydrogen has an atomic number of 1, and it has an atomic mass of 1. Okay. Keep in mind when you're drawing a Bohr diagram for the first 20 elements that you are rounding the atomic mass to the whole number. Okay. And now the protons, neutrons, and electrons, hydrogen has 1, which comes directly from the atomic number. Number of neutrons is 0, and I calculated that using atomic mass minus the number of protons. And then the number of electrons, because again, these are neutral atoms, my number of electrons should equal my number of protons. So when we're drawing now a Bohr model, you have to draw out your nucleus. So you're going to draw a circle for your nucleus. So this inside circle here is your nucleus. Okay? Don't mistake the first ring for your first electron shell. It represents your nucleus. So inside your nucleus now, we have to write in the number of protons and neutrons that this element has. So hydrogen has 1 proton and hydrogen has 0 neutrons. Okay, so we've taken care of our nucleus. Now we've got to draw in our electrons. And when we draw our electrons on a Bohr model or Bohr diagram are represented with a dot. Now, because hydrogen only has 1 electron, you can essentially put that electron anyway. But there is a pattern to drawing electrons in its electron shells, and we use the directions on a compass to kind of help us. So if we're looking at the directions on a compass, we've got north, south, west, and east. And when we draw our electrons, we draw our first electron in the north position, our second electron in our south position, and our third and fourth electron in the west and east position respectively. So because again hydrogen only has 1 electron, I will draw in a dot here to represent that 1 electron. And remember, this ring here is our first electron shell. So let's look at a harder example, and by harder, I only mean it has more electrons. The process is still the same. So our second and final example for this video tutorial is fluorine. So again, you're using your periodic table to come up with your answers on the left here. So fluorine has an atomic number of 9. It has an atomic mass of 19. It has 9 protons, 10 neutrons, and 9 electrons. So again, remember our first ring in here represents our nucleus. It is not our first energy shell. So we're going to start off by identifying the number of protons and neutrons in our nucleus. So I've got my number of protons is 9, and my number of neutrons is 10. Okay. Now remember, when drawing electrons, we're following the compass orientation. So I'll draw it out again because we've got more electrons here than we did in our last example. North, south, west, and east. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Remember that energy shell 2, 3, and 4 can have a max number of 8 electrons. So once you've drawn your 4 electrons, you start to pair them up. So 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. So the first energy shell has 2 electrons. So I'm going to draw those in the north and the south position. 1, 2. Okay. Then I know that my second energy shell has a max number of 8 electrons. And I know that fluorine has 9 electrons in total. So we're going to start to draw it in the north, south, west, and east position. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons. I need 3 more. And this is where you start to pair them up. Again, I need 3 more electrons. 1, 2, and 3. Always at the end, do a final count to make sure your electrons match what you actually have and what you need. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 electrons. And I've written out my number of protons and neutrons correctly. I've got 9 and 10. So this diagram on the right would represent a Bohr diagram for your fluorine atom. And remember again, atoms on the periodic table are neutral. That's all for today, guys.